Good morning. We now require a redesign of the Mac Pro. Yes, Tim, we've thoroughly rethought what a computer can be. So this design really encapsulates what essential minimalism will be like. Johnny, they don't like that. All right, fine. We don't have to do that, but we could always go back to Old Faithful. Yes, but Johnny, people are going to expect that to be modular. I don't know if we can make Apple Silicon that modular. We just have to create the magical illusion that is modularity. We charge people $50,000 for this design, and then we make it dated a year later. You're onto something here, but there's one slight problem you're forgetting about. Really? What's that? We also have to share silicon with the Mac Studio now. Yes. Well, for those reasons, I'm out. Oh, Johnny, come back. Please, Johnny, are we not getting any love from you? I cannot believe you said that. Am I the only one feeling like the Mac Pro just cannot catch a break? I mean, ever since Steve Jobs passed, it feels like they never really got their stride going with the Mac Pro. Obviously, there was the good old faithful cheese grater from back in the day. Steve Jobs was around for that one, but I don't know how involved in it he really was. Maybe it's something about the Mac Pro that kind of goes against a lot of what Apple stands for. Apple often is trying to be more environmentally friendly. They've got all these carbon neutral goals, right? And they always are looking for in their phones, in their watches, in their tablets and laptops, how do we get the best performance per watt? You know, it's all about making products thinner, making them lighter, and still giving them great capabilities. And I guess at its core vision, the Mac Pro was still oftentimes the antithesis of a lot of what Apple was always going for. Mac Pro just meant forget about the efficiency, forget about it looking pretty or the form factor. We just need to focus on a machine that's still made by Apple, still has Mac OS, but just has all of the performance you could possibly want out of a computer. Ignore the form factor, just go all in for performance. And of course, certain people who have just infinite budgets, but of course they still want to keep using a Mac, they're gonna buy those kinds of things. But it was always a small niche of the market. It was not meant to go super mainstream. It was not meant to outsell the iMac or the Mac Mini or the MacBook Airs or the MacBook Pros. Those were always going to be the more everyday, approachable consumer products, and the Mac Pro never quite went hand in hand with what Apple was going for. So in 2012/2013, that's when Apple tried to turn the Mac Pro more into something that aligned with kind of their overall mission statement, or at least aligned with their other product design philosophies of let's make this computer smaller, let's make it more portable. We're still going to make it as powerful as we can, but we're not going to make it look like other PC towers out there. That way we can brag about how quiet it is and how Apple rethought what a desktop tower could be. But then we all know how it ended for the trash can Mac Pro. Yeah, the I/O was fairly limiting and the performance was not as great as a lot of professionals were expecting it to be. It was also kind of pricey, and as cool as it was, and I still really enjoyed checking them out in person, it just didn't land all that well because so many pros out there missed the modularity of the old cheese graters, and they missed being able to open it up and tinker with it, and they just didn't get what they were looking for out of that original trash can Mac Pro design. And despite the fact that it upset a lot of the Mac enthusiast community, Apple kept using it for quite some time. The Mac Pro was never really in the limelight for Apple. It was never really their primary focus. Even if it wasn't selling well, even if it ticked a lot of people off, Apple pushed it on the back burner and just said, well, I guess it's kind of a niche product. We don't need to focus on that too much because we're more about laptops and thinner and lighter designs. Apple believed those are the future, and I think evidence has proven that turned out to be right. But then flash forward to 2019, where Apple knew they had kind of upset a lot of the pro community for the Mac fans, so they decided, let's go back to our roots a little bit. Let's make something a bit more modular, a bit more upgradable. But it couldn't have been at a worse time because they were trying to go back to their more modular roots while simultaneously building up this big transition away from the Intel, x86 architecture days in favor of the ARM architecture, because they saw how successful it was growing and scaling scaling with the iPhones and the iPads getting faster and faster, more efficient and more powerful. It was only a matter of time before the Mac made that switch as well. The rumors for this we saw coming from miles away. I remember the reports back in 2017, just from us doing Geekbench tests on new iPads with their A10X Fusion chips. We were like, man, these things are getting just as powerful, if not more powerful, than their Intel chips on Mac counterparts. So it was only a matter of time before this transition officially begun, but I don't know if it was a boardroom decision or it was just on their roadmap for a while. But Apple had decided that we gotta start shipping this Mac Pro before we announce the switch to Apple Silicon, because once Apple Silicon is announced, nobody's gonna want to buy this more Intel-based x86 architecture Mac Pro, because that is yesterday's technology, horrible performance per watt, and it's objectively just not the future. It's not where our technology is headed. So Apple was betting big on this whole ARM thing, but they likely had all of this time and money spent engineering that 2019 Mac Pro, so they're trying to figure out, I guess we still announce it? How do we price it? And of course, because they were trying to go back to their roots and make the opposite of what the trash can Mac Pro was, they decided, okay, let's make it super modular with these afterburner cards and let you add your own stuff in and make it really serviceable so you can take it all apart and hardly use any tools to pop in and pop out cards and drives and stuff. So they do all that. They start shipping it at the very end of 2019, and then within a matter of months announced that they will be switching away from Intel. Of course, I think making everybody who bought a Mac Pro feel kind of cheated, but of course, the next question we all have on the back of our minds is, okay, now with Apple Silicon entering the picture, now with the performance of the M1 chip being so great, what is it going to be like when Apple redesigns the Mac Pro all over again, this time with their own silicon from the ground up? There were rumors for a while of Apple using their processor stitching technology like we saw with the M1 Ultra and the M2 Ultra, doubling up that die again to get to the point where we have like 4 M1 Max or M2 Max chips all stitched together simultaneously, and we were going, oh man, Apple's got some crazy silicon in the pipeline. I can't wait to see how they redesign this with a smaller design but somehow make it more modular. How is modularity going to work with the whole unified memory architecture and their integrated GPUs and all that? I don't know, but I can't wait to see what Apple does. And the more we follow what's going on behind the scenes, the more we realize that you can't just keep stitching more and more chips together, because then there's limitations to how much these processors can really offload onto each other, and it's not exactly a linear scale up of performance. And once Apple starts realizing that this is going to be a very complicated manufacturing process for a chip that doesn't outperform their M1 Ultra processor as much as they had hoped, they start realizing this is gonna be kind of niche. And because it's taking so long for them to develop better silicon for the Mac Pro, they came up with another compromise, kind of a revival in a way of that trash can Mac Pro, with the idea being we want a desktop tower that is still small enough to fit on your desk, but of course more powerful than the Mac Mini, which has been around for a while. So they come out with the Mac Studio, and that kind of beats the punch to the Pro class desktop market before the Mac Pro does, and that's the biggest problem with the Mac Studio. It's just too dang freaking good. Apple quickly realizes that with this whole ARM architecture, if you're going for a desktop and you want more modularity and you want more performance, this is honestly the most efficient way to get it. You just build a little bit bigger tower than a Mac Mini, you stuff it with a decent heatsink, you maximize the number of ports on the back so there's lots of accessories you can plug into, and you sell it for a heck of a lot cheaper than you sold that giant inefficient cheese grater Mac Pro design, which eventually they just compromised on and decided, you know what, we're not going to change the design because we've already got the assembly lines running for the Intel based one. It's going to be too hard and too complicated to re-engineer all of these assembly lines, so let's just cram the existing M2 Ultra chip in the Mac Pro and call it a day. Now it's substantially more expensive than the Mac Studio, and for what? Adding a few audio networking cards. That's pretty much all it's got going for it, and it costs a whole lot more than the Mac Studio does. Once again, I think it comes full circle to the point that Apple's design philosophy fundamentally goes against everything that the Mac Pro is trying to be. Mac Pro was all trying to be about function over form, not trying to worry about efficiency, just let you draw as much power as you need to unlock the most amount of performance possible. But once Apple started designing all of their own silicon production in-house and they were no longer outsourcing GPUs and CPUs from other companies, it just made no sense at this point for them to keep a form factor that big and that clunky around anymore. Especially as the performance in their own in-house design chips got so good that these days there's less and less of a reason to go with a desktop in the first place, because now you can get more performance than you ever got from a desktop in a small, great portable laptop that lasts all day on a charge. And of course, you can still turn a laptop back into a desktop with a great external monitor, whether Apple makes it or not. So the laptop can be a desktop if you need it to be, but the desktops cannot be laptops if you need them to be. And because of that, there is this fundamental decade-long curse that has hovered over the Mac Pro that is Apple's design philosophy and the direction that they know computing was going into. Apple, I think, rightfully understood that the future is more about performance per watt, not just purely performance. And unfortunately, that's a lot of what the Mac Pro was founded on, just going all in with pure performance and not worrying about efficiency. And that just doesn't fly anymore in the age of the M3 chip and Apple realizing the capabilities of a 3nm architecture, especially now that they figured out how to get hardware accelerated ray tracing into laptops that don't even have fans anymore. Yeah, if you can fit that kind of silicon in thin, lightweight laptops and tablets now, why the heck do we need to fuss around with these big giant boxes that sit under our desk pumping dust out the back? Just doesn't make sense anymore for the market that Apple is going after. And in my opinion, the Mac Pro would really only justify its existence if Apple still planned on buying CPUs and GPUs from other companies just for one Mac, but that just complicates the whole operating system. Firmware calibration complicates the whole app market if you wanted to design games or experiences just for the Mac Pro. It's not a big enough market. They're not selling at high enough volume for Apple to justify continuing production of that kind of specialized hardware. It's much, much simpler for them to just have all of their Macs on Apple Silicon, manufacturing-wise, profitability-wise, and that's why the Mac Pro, I think, is just kind of fundamentally and permanently cursed to be this kind of awkward and expensive big bird in the lineup that sticks out like a sore thumb and is very difficult to recommend. I'd be very curious how many they're actually selling these days. I'm guessing not much because Mac Studio just kills all of the functionality of it. But what do you guys think? Is there any hope for the Mac Pro ever making sense? I just want to double down on the fact that there's been basically no leaks or rumors for any redesigned Mac Pro, even 5 or 6 years down the line. No one's talking about the Mac Pro, and I think that includes Apple at this point. But do you have ideas or visions for it? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos, so thanks again. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you all in the next one.